We'll call the meeting to order of the Coastal Commission at 7:34 on June 21st. The first full day of the solstice, right? I think,
yeah, longest day of the year, isn't it?
yeah, yesterday was a half day.
Yeah.
So before we start, I just thought we've got a new member in process, and he's joined us, Jim Furlong from Norotan Bay Association. I thought I'd let him introduce himself. He's been forwarded by the Republican Nominating Committee to the Board of Selectmen, so it's just a matter of time where we see him for real. So I invited him to join, and then promptly forgot to send him the link, so I owe him many apologies. But here he is, and Jim, if you might just give us a couple words on your background, it'd be great.
Sure, Bill, thanks. Yeah, I've been living in Darien for about 3 years now, moved in 2018. I grew up not so far from here on the other side of the Sound in Manhasset, Long Island, and spent, I guess, 20 years of my life doing a lot of boating in Oyster Bay. Once in a while, I'd venture across to the great northern coastline up here in Connecticut, but I never got to know it real well from that side. But I've been living here in the Bay for 3 years. I got involved with the board, and through that, I was introduced to Bill from another board member, Rob Strebel, who I guess, Bill, you were in contact with some safety signage around our kayak rack. And I think Rob looked to me, I'm in charge of our pier. And I think he said, you know, maybe I'd be more interested in this slot than himself, who was focused on the beach. And I definitely am interested in it. You know, again, I've spent a lot of time around salt water. I really care about how the water is maintained, recognize a lot of the decisions that we're going to be making today over the next 5 years can impact how people are enjoying this area 200 years from now. So I'm interested in it from a conservation standpoint and also from a safety standpoint, and want to see the people of Darien enjoying the great shoreline that we've got. I've met a few of you through the interviewing process, and Lori, I've met you. I'm a member of the Norotan Yacht Club as well. I've been in there for about 2 years now. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity. I think it's going to be really interesting for me, and I hope I can contribute a little bit.
Nice to have you aboard, Jim, and you're a great addition in your own right. And also it's great to have someone from Norotan Bay Association joining us. I think it's really been 3 or 4 years since, I think it was Palmer Sparkman was on our commission regularly.
Okay.
And so I think that's a real welcome interface, but your background's just great. So it's great to have you aboard, and I look forward to your final papers streaming through. So.
Great, thanks.
Let's see. The minutes, I think, are the next piece of business. And I want to compliment David on a very nice set there. They were really well done. So if anybody could second passing those.
I'll second.
And so if everyone's on board with them, show of hands. So we'll pass those, myself included. Again, nice job. And then I think it comes to the chairman's report, which I'm always glad to give. So we're officially scheduled. I just have several items, as you can see, officially scheduled for July 12 with our review by the Board of Selectmen of our strategic plan. So again, I welcome anyone who wants to attend that meeting. I'm even happy to give someone a part in the presentation, or just to be there for moral support, or if a question comes my way that I can't handle anyway. So again, July 12, I'll send a reminder out as the meeting comes up. Yeah, I'm hoping that's perfunctory, but I would be glad for any inquiry they make, because you know, I think there's a lot of nice subject matters that we should have more interchange with them on. And so maybe that's the beginning of some of that path. So that's good. I had several environmental things. I don't know if you've all had a chance to read them, so it's sort of just alerting you to them. One was really good news for the sound. That is the EPA released a nitrogen report. And I think I sent around the press release to you all. It was from a study that had been done by two University of Connecticut professors. I forget their names right off the top of the head. But that they showed how much improvement Long Island Sound has had since the I think since the 1990s, actually, in reduction in nitrogen. And pretty impressive statistics. And I was just going to bring up a graph, share my screen, and bring up a graph which sort of summarized everything. So everyone can hopefully see my screen.
Love it.
And if I can just find this thing. Yeah, so this was sort of their major finding. Maybe I'll blow it up a little. And it really was that overall, the average hypoxia in the sound has gone down just tremendously from, I think their stat is 1992, it was 205 square miles were hypoxia conditions in the sound. And that has dropped down to the far right to currently 2020 anyway, 94 square miles. And apparently that's from what they say, a nearly 50 million tons less nitrogen being released into the sound every year compared to 1990. So it's really just tremendous. And they credit it with a series of nitrogen reduction efforts that have been done in New York and Connecticut, $2.5 billion, they said, with wastewater effluent to capture more nitrogen and reduce what's released. So that's awfully good news. I thought that was worth sharing with you all. And the one thing I had a real, there's a real big but though that they make that they didn't elucidate much on. Perhaps the report itself talks more about. They said, however, that summer hypoxia, what we observe in Darien's waters in late July and the first couple of weeks of August, every year in our unified water study, we see it's not hypoxia, sorry, it's getting into stress levels. It gets to about 5 milligrams per liter, which is distress, or stress rather. And if it got to 3 or below, that's hypoxia. And we see that continually in our waters. And they say, the scientists say that should continue to increase these sort of real stressful times in the water at the hottest point in the season because of the warming waters that we're all experiencing. So a little bit of a caveat on the report there. Overall, we're doing better, but the intensity at key moments will continue to grow, was a comment they made. Anyway, thought you all might be interested in that. And on the environmental side, number 2, I sent around a copy of Save the Sound's beach report. And I'm not sure people had a chance to take a look at that. It doesn't seem to print. I couldn't make it print. I think maybe they made that happen on purpose, so retaining copyright or something, I don't know. But the long and the short of it is that Darien did quite well. I'm going to bring up the chart of our waters. So you can see, right, is everyone able to see the what I've brought up? It's like a table.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm circling up here are Weed Beach and Pear Tree Point. And those are tested regularly by CT Deep for bacteria. And this is only a bacteria study. This has nothing to do with general healthy conditions of the water. And we are green at 64 and 65. And green is, as you see down here in the bottom left, an A+ for water quality for both Pear Tree Point Beach and Weed Beach. In a prior year, I know Weed Beach had gotten, was it a B- or a C+? It had some bad measurements. And David Knopf was awfully irritated with their methodology, to be honest. And you may have had a point, but anyway, it's swinging our way this year. And that was a thing to be grateful for anyway.
Bill, I didn't see that in the packet. I was looking for it. I know there were a couple of emails. Was it the first or the second?
The first.
Okay.
Yeah, my apologies on the multiple emails. It wasn't Tom's fault. I had gotten more information after I sent him the first batch, and then he responded sequentially, which is natural. So
Okay, and this was included as a PowerPoint?
I think it's a PDF.
A PDF, okay. All right, because I want to be able to share this with my commission.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. If you can't find it, I'll resend it to you.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Yep. And then final piece of environmental news was really pretty incredible statistic or trend going on. So I'm on, as Flip was, when he was chair of the commission, I'm on the Long Island Sound Studies Citizen Action Committee. So they give us updates on the funding of Long Island Sound Study and the monies it gets from the federal government to apply to our waters, both Connecticut and New York. And I think I'd already told you for fiscal year 21, the budget had gone from this low 20s up to, I think it's $30.1 million. So, 50% increase, just incredible. The spigots are turned on now. It's pretty apparent if we all watch the news. And the president's own budget now proposes it's slightly over $40 million for the Long Island Sound Study budget for this coming fiscal year 22. If you just look at these increases, it's absolutely incredible. And it's the money's really pretty splintered out in how it's dispersed for different projects within Long Island Sound Study. So it's sometimes hard to get a grasp exactly where it's all going, but they're doing a lot of modeling on TMDL, on nitrogen loads for our embayments. So you're going to see a more precision about what the loading is and what the loading should be in various bays in Connecticut. And that work's going on now, and the budget for it's increased. And the Long Island Sound Futures Fund, which gives out grants for various implementation projects and assorted projects like education projects and like, is really increasing. So I think you'll see more creative projects happening locally. And at the end of the shellfish segment, we're going to report on the shellfish restoration project that CT Aquaculture is doing, and that's a recipient of increased funding under Long Island Sound Futures Fund. So, I think we're going to just continue to see over these next several years really interesting projects hitting the sound on the environmental side. So this is, whether or not this 40 million makes it through, it may not. It obviously may get pared back. But even at the $31 million level, we're just in a new ballgame for science projects and implementation projects. It's pretty exciting. So that's it on the environmental stuff. I'll stop sharing my screen. I think we're back to normal. Let's see. The only other thing I had to say was I'm trying to help out Sound Waters, who I think is an awfully good organization over in Stamford. And they have their annual flotilla and raise a fair amount of money doing that. And this year it's on July 10. And so I'd like to urge anybody and everybody who thinks of hopping on a paddleboard or a kayak to try to do that and support them.
Bill, didn't they get a significant funding from the state? Because I know that they're opening up a new building, giving scholarships and something like that. It was on the news, I'd say maybe 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah,
they've had a groundbreaking, and that's where the flotilla ends its paddle, is over at their new site. And I believe there's now some civil construction going on. And I don't know, Laurie, I think you're familiar with them. Do you have any more update on?
Well, my husband's board chair, so I'm probably way too familiar with it. It's basically his full-time job. Yeah, they did have the ground breaking for the Harbor Center about a week ago. And it will be an educational center, all kinds of programming for youth in terms of STEM, focus on Long Island Sound. They're doing programming around marine services to provide career pathing to young people, because there's a shortage, as many of us know, of qualified people to work on boats, and trying to find ways to, connect youth to maritime careers, science, technology, and whatever. So the building is underway. And it's really an exciting project. Doug's been working on it for a few years now, along with his board, and they've raised quite a bit of money. The flotilla goes, I thought, saw you had it on Pear Tree. The flotilla goes off from Weed Beach.
Well, so that my second plug here, first one was for Sound Waters and their flotilla, which is a great cause and event.
Yep.
But the second plug is something that Tom Lochtefeld and I, for a second year in a row, are trying to get going. I guess we didn't do it in the pandemic year, but there's a contingent now that leaves also from Pear Tree. And we go over to Cove, connect with the main group, and then go to Stamford Harbor.
Oh, okay.
And it's called the Darien Boat Club Paddlers, and you can choose teams when you sign up for this event. And one can choose the Darien Boat Club Paddlers and then just meet down at the Darien Boat Club right at the beach. And I'm forgetting, I think we leave like a full hour before they depart from Cove, so we give plenty of time to get over.
So you're just showing off, is what I'm hearing, by going
That's right, 'cause
farther. Okay.
we paddle it backwards just to show our acumen there.
Okay.
But the it's a great event again, and if anyone wants to join up, or if you know a friend who's looking to do something with a stand-up paddleboard or a kayak or even a canoe, maybe if it's a calm day, happy to have them join us at Pear Tree Point. So shameless commercial for a good cause there.
Thank you for that.
Right, and just one last thing, they will have a truck bring the kayaks right back to Pear Tree Point and make it a stop on the way back. So, and the bus.
And there's lunch at the headquarters in Stamford, so you are paddling towards an event, which is sort of fun. And I think the last time I did it, which wasn't last year because of the pandemic, but the year before, they had at the breakers at Stamford, they had a boat handing out refreshments for those who were tired from the first 3 miles or so.
Well, the governor was at the groundbreaking, and he made some indication that he and his wife might be interested in participating. So
it's a lot of fun. My wife and daughter did it, and they kayak regularly, but they got a real charge out of going off with this group. You go off with a fleet, and it's sort of a lot of energy is all positive and everyone's smiling. It's a fun event. Anyways, that's it for me. And I think, Tom, if you'd like to give a Harbor Masters report, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I was on mute. It's going to be another crazy year. We're sitting at 190 people on our wait list for moorings in predominantly Darien Harbor. Not a lot of space left, certainly not for all those. And I'm getting the calls that I just bought a boat, I need a mooring. It's like, or I just got a boat and it's sitting in the driveway and my wife gets it out of the driveway. So it's another typical crazy year. But otherwise than that, not much else is new.
Hey, Tom, just to give you an update, I went out the other day with Hank Warwick and just sort of toured the harbor, trying to see if we could find spaces for additional moorings. I do think that there are probably around 10 spaces that we could fit in. Maybe someday you'd like to come out and ride around with us and take a look at them?
Yeah, I'd like to do that flip. When I was coming back, I think it was either Saturday or Sunday from my mooring in Scott, I noticed a lot of empty, some spaces on the western side of the harbor as I was coming in.
Yeah.
And then, we've talked about the eastern side of the harbor where there's just a lot of rocks that you can't see underneath at, mean low tide kind of thing. It's just, we've tried to put moorings in there. We are also trying to put, some of the larger boats out further, and that gives us some space. And then just another aside, kind of a funny question. This is probably the third time I've gotten it. They wanted to see if they could sell a waterfront piece of property to a person who has a 200-foot yacht that they wanted to moor at someplace. And I'm going, nowhere near here.
Well, I'm happy to go out whenever it's convenient for you. I know you got a lot going on, but.
Yep. Yeah, I've got I've got a lot of surgeries coming up, so maybe towards the middle of July.
Okay.
So
Who is monitoring the proximity of the boats to each other, though? For instance, we feel the boat next to us is honestly too close. And my husband's emailed Hank and Jeff to say, can you look at this and possibly move it over a bit? You know, we came in one day and it was uncomfortably close and we've frankly gotten no response. So who monitors? I mean, you're talking about packing more in, but you know, I think there's some of us who feel that the boats are pretty tightly packed on the west side.
yeah,
Well,
that would be,
Sorry.
that would be either Jeff or Hank.
Okay.
Yeah, so Jeff is doing the moorings through July 31st, and then kind of Hank and Norotan will take over from there as part of Jeff sort of stepping back.
So Lori, I'll take the action to get Jeff to check out your mooring to make sure it's okay.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, there should be some monitoring because I mean, as they are tightly packed and, you know, and it can actually be, but we have friends whose boat was already hit by the boat next to them this season because they were too close. So Jim's nodding, so it's pretty tight in there and, you know, it's more the no wind days where everybody's depending on their weight and their shape or stuff are swinging in all different directions. And you go out there and you got another boat, it's uncomfortably close.
Understand.
Okay.
Yeah, Lori, just to be clear, the moorings that I think we could stick in are not in the middle of the existing moorings. They're around kind of the periphery.
Okay.
So it's not a matter of making things denser.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no.
My recollection, Lori, is that's a little bit of a difficult zone with what now is, I think, September, where my mooring used to be.
Yep.
And Ishkadu and I used to have troubles. We got within like a foot of each other.
Yeah, you used to be right next to me.
Yeah, and that's a little tight area. For some reason, that doesn't work so well in there.
Yep.
Anyway.
What the issue that I've seen on the calm days is that when the tide is coming out, is going down, the water comes down through the gut near the boat club and flows out the channel like it was a river. And so there's a very sharp edge to the flowing water. And then right even 3 feet outside of that edge, there's no current, or in fact, the current is a backwards eddy. And so when there's no wind, there can be, the current does very strange things to the boats.
So how are the clubs doing? Are the clubs, I mean, it seems like to me the harbor's a little behind, like still all the boats aren't still out there. Are the clubs slowed up a bit in the launchings? No?
I think when I was looking at the other day that the boat club is pretty much filled up. There's a couple of empty spaces on E-Dock, but predominantly everybody's on, and you know, we require them to be on without an exemption on the 15th of June.
Yeah, that Norotan is open for business and it's like it's 2019.
We were down waiting for race committee to start a week ago Sunday, and I overheard 2 women talking about how neither of them had their boats in the water yet because the marinas hadn't finished up the work. So it's been slow getting boats out. We brought ours back. They didn't finish the work, so now we've had to take it back again for the week. So just generally what we're hearing is the marinas were very backed up this year in terms of being able to get the boats ready for the season, and that people are getting their boats much later than they would have liked.
Yes.
Jim, the Norotan Bay's got dozen and a half boats. Is that full up?
Yeah, as far as I know, it's filled up. It's the same number of boats out there this year as what we had last year, because I kind of count the dinghies on the dock, and nothing has throttled back at all. But I don't think we're as densely packed as the other side.
No,
Jim, most of those boats are people who live in the bay, right? Because they access them through your
about
dock or through the beach.
3/4 of them are. There's a few folks who take kayaks out of Weed Beach.
Okay.
Yes.
and kayak out into the moorings in the shallower area near the weed beach line.
Yeah, I put most of those in at their request.
Can I make an observation about the start of the boating season? I have a sticker for the boat ramp. Sometimes I feel like I may be the only one. I think this may be the third year in a row I have sticker number 1, maybe a reflection of my obsessive compulsive disorder and doing this early. But I got my boat late for all the reasons you've described, and I went to launch it, and I think it was a day where the wind was blowing very strongly from the north, and that boat ramp, that whole slot was completely filled up with some combination of reeds and garbage, and it looked like, I just thought to myself, should I even be putting my boat in here? Am I going to get just completely jammed up with this stuff? And I launched into it. Lori, I'm just wondering if that in those, maybe this is the first time I've ever seen it just completely packed with junk like that. Or the people who are cleaning the beach, who seem to do a great job doing that, I wonder if they ought to be making a pass in there once in a while to clear out what makes it almost impassable for people launching.
Okay, I'll bring that up. I'll definitely, I mean, we're still waiting to hear from Connecticut Deep on our application regarding the parking lot, which would impact redoing the boat ramp, and we're just waiting. We did our soil samples and those have been sent in, so it's a waiting game with them right now.
And
Just some feedback. Just some feedback real quick on the detritus, which is on the ramp. A lot of that is the cut reeds. The guy who owns Goose Island across the street, apparently he comes in and has his men just literally side the reeds down in the spring, and they just generally float right into the boat ramp and into the club. It's, I don't know how they allow that, but I don't think anybody complains.
interesting. Well, let's see, maybe moving on from the clubs, if everyone's set there. We've been doing some work on the mooring standards. Flip, would you perhaps be able to summarize a little bit of our call the other week?
Sure. So Bill and Dave and Rob and I had a call last week. It was really for Dave and Rob to report their findings in an outreach effort that both of them have done, and kudos to them. They did a lot of calling and talking to people and looking at harbor mooring standards on the internet. And so I think at this point, we feel like we've at least touched base with a lot of the other harbors to see if they are doing anything kind of materially different than we are. And I guess the good news is it seems like what we're doing in terms of our standards generally fall within, sort of the range of practice that other harbors have. There doesn't seem to be any single gold standard or a best practice way of doing things. Every harbor seems to do things sort of idiosyncratically their own way. But I think within that range of variability, what we are currently doing seems generally to fall in those parameters. I think there are, as we've talked about before, efforts that we can make to improve the safety and efficacy of our moorings that actually kind of fall below the level of detail of the mooring standards. They're in the specific details of how the mooring system is constructed and then maintained. And so we are continuing, I think the four of us are continuing our efforts to try to refine our thoughts on that. And we'll circle back with Tom when we've kind of pulled together some thoughts. But the next step is for all of us to go try to grab some time with Hank Warwick, who's the new facilities director at the Norotan Yacht Club, and has also for the last, I think, 12 years run his own mooring servicing business in the North Shore of Long Island, and just also use that as an interactive session to get his thoughts on what we might do slightly differently. But I think from a big picture point of view, the results of the work that has been done show that our current standards are at least plus or minus within the range of what everybody else is doing, and that there's no silver bullet that anybody has that's different than what we're doing. And Dave, I don't think Rob is on, but Dave or Bill, if you want to add anything, that would be fine.
That's pretty much it. Looking forward to meeting with Hank, see what his thoughts are.
I was going to mention, Flip, I really like some of your thinking that, initial thinking that it may not be so much in the setup, the initial equipment spec, but it may be in the maintenance we specify going forward on that equipment. So maybe more periodicity in certain maintenance tasks, or precluding some things from being fixed, they should be replaced. So there may be different levels that we can supplement the current minimum standards with on that line of thinking. So I thought that was really a good avenue to go down.
Yeah, it may turn out that some of those get incorporated in a set of guidelines for the mooring servicers rather than specifically targeted at the mooring owners.
Yeah, I think, because particularly the mooring owner, just thinks in terms of that initial capital purchase, and then thereafter it's always been what Jeff Eng recommends, and now in this case it's Hank, and so we should understand what they're doing and maybe create some more guidelines.
Yep.
So if anyone wants to join this team of 4, but we'll keep moving this forward. I think it doesn't have a time schedule this month or next month, but it'd be nice to wrap up this season. So as people prepare for next, they've got a new refreshed set of guidelines. No questions on that. So we'll switch over to Shellfish and Eric, who's been busy on a couple things. And I've joined him on a couple of these, so I'll chime in where he lets me.
Well, I guess the first element that we worked on was getting Roger Freight back into Scotts Cove. So we talked to the people at the Department of Agriculture, and they issued him the license on the same day that we actually emailed him. So that was actually pretty impressive. And Roger Jr. was back in the area the following week. So one of the conditions for Roger's being allowed back into Scotts Cove right now is from December through May were the tolerable dates. One of the conditions, obviously, was for him to be able to take out some of the clam beds that are in Scotts Cove and to repopulate the recreational beds. So I managed to get the report from Roger Jr. of his activity. So I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Are you able to do that, or do I have to?
I'm trying to, hold on.
Sometimes you have to be authorized.
Maybe, well, I sent it to you and Tom earlier. I don't know if you want to do it.
Yeah, I'll find it in 2 seconds. Hold on.
Go ahead. So as Bill gets that actually going, so we have the report for the last 3 weeks of May when he was basically let back in, and as it turns out, they took 32 crates, and each crate holds about 700 and 750 larger clams. And they transplanted 32 of those into the plot number 511, which is one of the recreational beds. So he's in the last 3 weeks of May, they transplanted roughly 20 to 22,000 clams into the recreational beds. So he's definitely doing what he had expected, what we were expecting him to do.
Is that the bed on the east or the west side?
I forget. I think it's the one closer to Fish Island.
So can you guys see this? This is what Eric sent me.
So there are two of them. There's basically all through May, and it gives us his beginning time and end time of when the clams were actually removed from Scotts Cove, and further down the time at which they were then retransplanted into that area.
Anybody validate that though?
I'm actually going to be going there with Junior the week after 4th of July. I'm actually going to go out there with him and make sure that he puts in the last ones that he's supposed to put in.
Isn't anything would come out of Scotts Cove restricted relay, and doesn't that have to be then depurated in like open water before that would go directly onto the recreational beds?
These are considered restricted, but the relay time is considered short term. That's what's on the document.
Yeah, this is the 2 weeks, isn't it? That he takes them out of Scott, throws them someplace else for 2 weeks.
Yep.
That they, I guess
But
it's specified. Is that right, David?
I'm just looking at the thing that you have up there, and I don't know what happened, but if they came out in the first thing from 6 to 10 and then got deposited on those beds at 10:30, either you have to close those recreational beds for some period of time, or you would have to put them somewhere else for some period of time. You couldn't put them directly on there without closing the beds.
I will double check with Scott when with Roger when I talk to him next.
It might be interesting for us to try to populate more observers on when he's going to do this. And it may be that we could get people to volunteer to go out. I would be happy to go out once or twice. I do think there is probably a benefit for us to just observe what is actually going on. You can imagine a lot of things maybe not working as we thought.
Things.
One of the things, so Bill and I met with Senior and Junior last week, and one of the things they mentioned is that there's a plot near the clumps, not the clumps themselves. I know that that's an area of contention, but there's a plot, I forget the number, which had been originally associated with the Scotts Cove license, so to speak. And he wanted some clarification on that. So that is something that we will have to be able to talk to Dave Carey about and see what were the conditions associated with that plot.
Yeah, that was the other one that was yanked when he transgressed the rules on Scott Cove. So I don't quite know why Carey did that. While he synchronized those actions and did them together. Maybe it was just a bigger slap with regard to the Darien leases. So I think, so the talk Eric's mentioning, we went to both Rogers and asked, so, hey, what would you like in Scott Cove? We're talking about, we've talked about this in a prior session, giving them back their license for Scott Cove, and now per their request, this other lease off our shores. And there was a good talk. I mean, they were more apologetic, I think, for the transgressions of the other year than before. And I think it was a good, honest talk. And basically, we're talking about the various points in the town addendum to the license. And Eric and I went back and forth with them on what they would like to see come out of a new town addendum. And quite frankly, it's not very different from the prior town addendum. And we sort of went through things point by point, and it was helpful to get some history on it. The original dates were what, Eric?
December 5th to end of April, and prior years were end of May. So we basically made it the longer possible time frame from December 1st to May 31st.
Actually, my recollection, but you could be right, was that we gave them all November also.
I think we gave them November as well. Yes.
Yeah, and we said, would you, frankly, we asked them if they'd like more, and they said, no, we don't want to be in that crowded, summer filled or active boating season filled cove. So they recognize the
But one of the things that was mentioned is that the area in Scotts Cove that they're allowed to go back into is about 23 acres with the GPS markers at each corner. But it used to be, prior to, I'm going to say 2016 or 2015, that they were allowed probably another 20-25 feet in every direction closer to shore. But because homeowners in that area were refusing for DEEP to come in and do the water testing, there was no way to gauge the water quality to see if the clams were healthy enough to be harvested or clean enough to be harvested. And so unfortunately, they know that one boat length away in every direction along that 23 acre area is a bounty of larger clams that should be taken out. So Senior especially wanted to see if we could extend or increase the size of the overall harvesting area. But this is something that we would have to have the approval from Department of Agriculture. It's not something that we were willing to take on ourselves or to go to bat for, without some sort of blessing.
Yeah, I don't know if we as a commission would have a view on that. The homeowners weren't objecting to necessarily to clamming, but were objecting to DEEP testing for things that might point to their septic systems being bad.
Correct.
It was sort of a defensive posture. That's what situation seemed to imply. And I've heard something like that. So that shut the area down to just 23 acres. And, I think at the end of Roger Senior was encouraging us to go fight that battle. And, that's not a battle we're going to fight. And we basically said, look, if you can win that one of CT DEEP and they can tell us in a well-reasoned argument why we should enlarge your fishing ground there, I don't see why we would have a stronger view than CT aquaculture. So, I don't think that one's going to change, and neither did Roger Jr. I think he saw that was a hard task to put on anybody. Interestingly enough, in the addendum, it specifies that they should put stakes on every corner of this 23 acre plot. And I know that to be the usual case for shellfishing grounds. Roger Jr. said he doesn't want them. He feels they'll just injure a boater here or there because there's enough recreational boats operating in there. And he says he doesn't need them. He says the grounds are are very clear to him. That's a little bit of an ironic statement, but anyway, so he would like to see that not be a requirement. And I sort of sympathize with him because I was once sailing at night and nearly got one of those in my face as I leaned over to use my binoculars. So I actually thought we could just leave that out. If Roger doesn't think he needs them, I think it's a safer boating condition to not have them. Does anyone have a different view on that for a particular reason?
Well, they all seem to put stakes everywhere else. What's different about this?
Well, I don't quite know why he wouldn't want to do it. It's extra work, right? Maybe he also fears someone might come to them claiming injury from the stakes they put in the ground. But he honestly says he can line up the proper rocks. He knows the boundaries. He says also he can just look at his GPS.
He charts it. He charts his runs anyway. So when he puts it in, the boat follows whatever chart plotting he puts in.
So I can see that. I could see if I was him, I wouldn't need them once I got used to the grounds and following my chart plotter. But I don't know, Flip. Do you think there's a reason we should be requiring them?
No, I don't feel strongly about it one way or the other. I just note that, offshore, there seem like they put stakes in all the time. There's plenty of bamboo stakes in the water right now. And I just wonder why this is different.
He did mention he can line up a couple rocks, given that it's shoreside proximity. Maybe it's just an easier one to, yeah, I think he said on the east side, there's just two rocks that form the boundary. And then he mentioned something else on the west side. So maybe that's the case, whereas in open water, that's not so easy.
Yep.
I don't know. But I was inclined to let that one go unless there was a property, and Eric and I talked about that and didn't see any reason. So I think where this is headed, you know, we talked about this prior, and I think generally there was a acceptance or a you know, a willingness to let the freights go back in Scott and to see if it would be helpful to them to expand the amount of work they can do there. I think, again, we benefit from this, from having the public clams deposited. And we also get Scott Cove, I think, worked to a healthier ground. Right now, I think it's pretty, they say it's pretty mucked up with weed down at the bottom. So this would create more of a, you know, working the bottom and turning it and getting something other than a trash covering on it. And
He did mention that on the surface of the sediment, on the surface of the grounds themselves, that there was a large amount of reddish brown algae, sort of decaying matter that has just covered the entire area. And that every time they make their first run, that basically everything that they take out is just that, only algae on the first run when they're scraping the bottom.
Eric, when you say take out, does he actually keep that stuff on the boat and then take it back to the dock or throw it back in the water?
He takes it on the boat and dumps it offshore.
Gotcha.
And
He's scraping those beds.
Hundreds
He's
of
not
thousands
using.
of pounds of the stuff. I'm sorry?
Is he scraping? He's raking those beds with
Correct.
yeah, okay.
And so basically the first cut, so to speak, is just taking off all this algae, and then he goes back and then is able to actually harvest some animals.
And then the clams are done by suction.
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of a rake with some sort of suction device also. It's not just a drag.
Okay.
So I think our next step on this is to mark up the addendum to reflect the points we're talking about here. And it's a little loosening for him. He seemed quite appreciative. Flip, I will note, we talked, came back to the subject of trying to get his boat quieter in operation, more muffled, better muffled.
Yeah.
And we got definite feedback from them that their muffler is up to date, appropriate for their 600 horsepower Caterpillar, and nothing could change.
It's a dry exhaust, so you basically can't constrict it without affecting the output of the engine and reliability downstream.
Still is extremely loud.
You know, I made the point. We kept coming back to it 3 times, so much that I started to get smiles from them. I was sounding like a broken record. I don't have the technical expertise to know if more can be done on that 600 horsepower engine.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as Eric said, it's a dry exhaust, and that's the source of the problem. Every other boat in Darien Harbor has a wet exhaust. And it's just a matter of reconfiguring your exhaust. Can't make it quieter as a dry exhaust, but it's a matter of reconfiguring exhaust. The question is it appropriate to be kind of having the town foster a loud, I mean, for the people who don't live on the water, you you don't experience it, but every morning at 5:30 in the morning, he hammers out the harbor and goes out to his fishing grounds. And many people hear it on both him going out and then turning east and heading out past the east side of Long Neck Point. It's every morning. We don't have lawn guys doing lawn service with loud things at 5 o'clock in the morning.
It's 7:30, I beg to say.
Yeah, which is probably too early also, but
No, good point. How about this, Flip? I don't know enough about engines to know how much of an imposition it would be for us to keep on the dialogue about this with him. Would Grant Tankus, for example, be a good source on what would be feasible here and maybe the cost?
yeah, I guess, I mean, all the boats Grant has have wet exhaust.
Yeah. Maybe you might have a friend at Caterpillar. I mean, I'm for bringing this up again.
It doesn't have anything to do with Caterpillar or whatever engine it is. It just has to do with the way that the exhaust system is designed.
Right.
But going from dry to wet, I assume that's a major engine reconfiguration with through hulls and all that sort of thing. So I doubt that's an easy imposition on somebody.
Yeah, or don't fish at 5:30 in the morning.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm sure there's a lot of Darien residents who do also. I don't quite know where to take this one. Why don't we give it some more thought? We've got a nice dialogue going with them on this, and I think it's not outside of us to try to have a quid pro quo for some of the extra time we're giving them in the cove. So why don't we talk more about it?
Or for using the town docks as a commercial dock and everything else. I mean,
Yeah, no, fair point.
the town basically facilitates his business, that's all good, but it does raise the question of why do we let him, create all this noise nuisance at 5:30 in the morning, every morning.
I believe there's a noise ordinance if you have a car without a muffler on it. And the police can give you a ticket for that. Maybe we can ask the Marine Police if that applies in this case.
Well, it clearly doesn't apply to motorcycles.
Yeah. I know, they don't, I don't think they enforce it much, if at all. But I think there is an actual noise ordinance.
Well, I don't.
Yeah.
I
Well,
see
we do
beach, right?
continue to accommodate him by allowing him to leave the 2 skiffs on the town dock. I've made sure that we approve it only for 6 months at a time. It comes back up for the commission to talk about so that we don't lose sight of it, which is what happened in the past. And then it kind of went on for years with no monitoring, and we make sure we get the insurance certificates now. Frankly, no one in the commission really likes it, but we have been encouraged to work with him. So we continue to do so. When we get to the point where we, can work on rebuilding the boat ramp, that may be an issue, because if that's being worked on, he's not going to be able to put his boats there. But, we haven't, we've talked to the boat club folks, and there just doesn't seem to be any other alternative for him to access his vessels. But I mean, we absolutely are accommodating, and we are not charging. And we've discussed as a commission whether we should charge him. And the feeling was it was probably better not to get into something where we were taking a fee, because then that it codifies it even more, as opposed to it being an accommodation.
Hey, Eric, do you think there's a way to find out the harvest that he's received from Scott Cove and his lease off Darien?
Like the total weight of what he's harvested so far this year?
Yeah, well, maybe what he's done over the last couple of years, what he does per year. I'm just wondering if we can quantify it, if that's something, does aquaculture track that? I mean, maybe you have to make an assumption on a per shell basis or per ton of shell. So like if
I'd ask aquaculture first because he does have to file reports on how much he does get. I don't want to go to Roger Senior or Junior first.
I think every shell fisherman files daily reports
They
with
do.
aquaculture in terms of the number of bushels of product that they pull off their grounds. I would think that aquaculture would have that readily available.
Well, Eric, why don't,
They have not always readily available.
Dave, say that again?
They have it. To request it and get it is an entirely different matter.
Yeah, yes, fair enough.
so, but
Well, I'll email Kristen and see if she has these reports, at least whether it's, last couple of months, last couple of years, and see what we can actually extrapolate from it.
I think it's a good thing to do. It's sort of in parallel to us slowly working this contract up for implementation in the later fall. If we're handing out some favors here, let's understand what they're already getting from us and what that may enable us to ask in return.
Okay.
I'm not even sure of the quantities we're dealing with here, but maybe this could have a fruitful outcome.
Well, the thing is, if we're looking at the papers we were looking at earlier, if he put 32 crates, which is roughly 21,000 clams back into recreational beds, that means he pulled 10 times that because he's supposed to give us 10%. That's a significant amount in a month, in my view.
All right, well, let's try to get some numbers there and
Okay.
see where that leads us in our talks.
Okay.
All right. Good feedback from people. Thank you. Let's see, the only other, Eric,
The visit to the gut for the with Kristen, so we could do the take a look at the oyster beds.
yeah, I'm gonna share my screen again because
Oh.
I've got bring up some pictures here. So there we go. So this was Kristen DeRosio-Bannock and also Tessa Gretchen. Is that right, Eric?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so with aquaculture and Sea Grant respectively. And they are working on a shellfish restoration interactive tool. To me, sort of is like the Long Island Sound Blue Plan, but for oysters up and down the Connecticut coast. And I think if you remember, they were down in Goodwise River and also in 5 Mile River June 1st and invited us down to sort of show them where our oysters were naturally growing. And their goal is to map these out, GIS location with lots of data associated with it, and put it on this website, which I guess apparently is already in place. I think I sent you the link. Was that in the, I think that was in the, yeah, that was in the agenda. Anyway, I guess the shellfish restoration story map is just been launched in April, and that's one of the first of its kind. And aquaculture is involved, Sea Grant and DEP, and Pew Charitable Trust has helped fund them. I guess they have about $80,000 of money to do this. And they're trying to figure out where things are growing, why they're growing, and where they should help other oysters grow and how to do so. And just to I'll run through some of the pictures here.
By the way, they ought to share that picture with their colleagues at DEEP who approved that dock, which has never been used.
The story of most of the docks. So that's in Goodwise River across from, I think, your old property, Flip.
Yes.
Across the river.
And I actually love this picture of Eric. You can see he's charming everybody.
Oh, please. Just trying to hide the gut, my gut.
What's up here? Sorry, something's going wrong. So we just sort of went up and down the riverbank, and they had a associate, or maybe it was an intern, get down in the muck and take pictures of things. I think those are going to appear back on the website. Perhaps you can click on the website. But there's quite a growth. Flip, in your time living across from this bed, I imagine you saw it really get 2 or 3 times its size, right?
Yeah, it has visibly grown over the last 10 or 15 years. And there's one across the body of water from where that is. And then all north of that riverbank there along the shore where Pear Tree Point Road is, they've really come in nicely there.
Actually, I think it's in the next pictures, Bill, right? Because we were walking north as we did that. There you go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's an interesting place because that is an area where when they open the floodgates for the Rings End Dam there, it blasts out that area and it cleans the sediment off of the oysters where they are, kind of growing in that picture. And I think that creates good habitat for them. That's why the oysters are up there.
And would the salinity of the water be a little lower because of the fresh flow coming down the Goodwise River?
Yeah, well, the salinity of the water there varies, I would think, during the course of the day quite a lot, because when it's high tide, it's almost pure salt water.
Sure.
And when it's getting to be low tide like this, it could be almost all fresh water.
Just as a reminder, while we have been on the topic of the freights, there was a specific request to harvest seed oysters in the Goodwives River here, which in consultation with the Department of Aquaculture, we declined, but because, well, one, probably residents of along the Goodwise River would go bananas, but two, the Department of Aquaculture described that to me as like a pretty unique resource in Connecticut, those reefs that exist, which I think are quite a good hatchery, if that's the right word, for juvenile oysters. So they were very opposed to having any of that disturbed for the harvesting of seed oysters.
Hear, hear.
It's pretty interesting work. I talked to Kristen about all the things she would be doing on this. And she says they're doing a lot of DNA testing of the oysters in these areas where they're naturally growing well to determine, I don't quite know all the things she's looking for, but they do want to make sure they're not diseased. Apparently you could have rampant growth, but it also carries a virus with it. And so you don't necessarily want to encourage growth in areas which may be virused. And so they look for certain signs, whether this bunch of seedlings are a healthy set to try to replicate and take some out and replant, or if you should let this bank go and not make it more abundant because you're helping proliferate a virus. All way over my head, but she's got a fair number of significant research tasks to do on this. So I don't know if there's any more on that, other than that, they could be coming back to us with thoughts about our beds and how to make them grow more or keep them from growing. I don't quite know what, but they're in the early stages of cataloging where they're observing growth. And part of it is for restoration and growth projects. And so there could be a stage 2 for this Goodwise River, 5 Mile River, and other parts of Darien. So they were going to keep in touch with us on where they're going with this. That was really, Eric, if you had more to say, that's about all.
It was actually, I never paid much attention to that area. If I go to Pear Tree and I'm just driving down the road or something like that, I never looked over it and saw what was actually going down the river. It was really quite interesting to go there at low tide and see how active it was.
Well, if we've got no other discussion on that, I was just going to swing us to other business. Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up that we haven't covered yet tonight? I had one thing to bring up, and we can have some discussion on it. It's not simply a scheduling matter, but 2 years ago, we had our first barbecue as a group and brought in the Board of Selectmen. I thought that was a really nice affair at Frank Kemp's house. And it would be great to do that again, assuming the Delta variant doesn't start closing us down again. I was talking over with Flip a little bit, and we were thinking perhaps a later September date might work well for people after all the summer buzz is down. I don't know, how do people generally feel about that? Would that be an event that we'd all like to do and figure out the logistics on it a little later?
Yeah. The event at Frank's was fun, actually.
Well, what I might do is there's ways to do this, like what is it, schedule doodle or something like that, but I might just send everybody an email asking for their thoughts on dates and when they might be free. Generally, we won't necessarily get everybody, but we'll try for a best shot. And if anybody's, thinks they are uncomfortable with the event because of COVID and that sort of thing, maybe they could just tell me they're not available in September or something like that. I don't need to know more, but we'll just try to get a general feeling of people's availability to try to replicate that again. And I'll likewise after that see how the Board of Selectmen are for joining something in later September.
Yeah, the only challenge with later September is it gets dark very early. So if you're thinking of a real barbecue, that would be a little trickier.
Didn't we do Frank's in September last time? I thought it was.
I feel like it was August.
Was it? Well,
Just something to keep in mind.
yeah, good point.
The other thing I would mention is I've been trying to do a little research about returning to in-person meetings. And what I was able to find out is that all of the governor's special proclamations, or whatever you call them, all the sort of COVID things we've been able to do, including meeting virtually for public meetings rather than in person, expire on July 20th. So the implication would be that thereafter we need to go back to in-person meetings. It's not completely clear, but that was the implication. There is apparently pending legislation that might make permanent or make available under some kind of circumstances a continuation of having public meetings in this virtual format, and that's working its way through Hartford. I chatted with Wayne Fox about it. He didn't have a lot of details yet, so he said once that was signed, if that's approved, he would have to look at it to determine under what circumstances.
I assume that at some point the town itself will direct all of its commissions and public bodies whether they should be meeting in person or publicly or
The
remotely.
guidance has not been abundantly clear. So I made some inquiries, and that was the information that I got back.
I've asked 3 times and been discouraged from meeting in person. But it wasn't, frankly, until the last month and a half that I've felt more open to it myself.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Laurie, yeah, let's keep touching base with you on that. I don't know where that's flowing, and it'd be great to meet when we can. We did take an informal poll 2 meetings ago, and it was clear not everybody was on board with meeting. So there's also how we as a commission may feel, and we'll continue to talk about that. We don't need to rush back in. It certainly would be nice to meet in person, but if it's going to exclude some people, we need to think about how we do it. So.
I think the one thing I would suggest is that because I've participated in a couple, the sort of combination Zoom / in-person meeting. Unless you have like a huge TV screen, it seems, my own personal experience, I'd rather do it all by Zoom than, because the people in person never end up seeing the people on the Zoom part of it.
I think in business for years, it was always the person on the conference line, and they were always pretty well kept out of, if it was a group of, 4, 5, 6 people in a conference room and one person on a conference line, they just were basically in listening mode for most of it.
Yep.
Yeah, so the email I had from Jamie Stevenson last week said that there is language in the budget implementer bill that is supposed to address the continuance of the allowance for virtual meetings until April 2022. We need to wait till that bill is voted upon to get a clear picture of what meeting rules will be in place after July 20th.
So funny in between zone. So we'll just keep monitoring and let people know.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, any other business? So movement to adjourn.
Excellent.
All right. So it looks like we are all wrapped up. I hope all your summers continue well. It seems that we're mostly all out there having fun. So hope to see you on the water.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.